start with the Patriots, who are playing the Ravens here in the early game at 3 o'clock. And let's start with Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski has set all kinds of records as a tight end. In your mind, is he clearly the #1 fantasy tight end on draft day next year?
Hands down. I mean, you could make a case for Jimmy Graham, but I love what Gronk did. He had a record-setting number of touchdowns this year. Graham and Gronkowski rewrote the playbook and record book for tight ends. I mean, especially how they're used as fantasy weapons. They're not a tight end anymore. That's an additional wide receiver you're getting. They both finished in top 10 in touchdowns, top 10 in receptions and yardage. I mean, they put up huge numbers, and it was just unparalleled. If you look at those guys, they don't play like tight ends. They play like an additional wide receiver out on the field. So I think you can make a case between the two, but based on what you saw to Gronk and that relationship he has with Brady going forward, I think he's the man. I'm a little bit hesitant, with given the Aaron Hernandez factor because he was huge as well. But Gronk, every time you counted him out, he was up there, putting up another touchdown. And it just, like I said, either one, but I'm still going Gronk.
So 2 more questions about Gronk. In your mind, again, when we get to tiers next year, is it Gronk, Jimmy Graham, and then everybody else, or do you put Antonio Gates up there, all things being equal?
Gates, his injury past is just too filled with red flags in those feet. He was an elite tight end. He's actually the guy that started this whole movement towards the more athletic, more elite, wide receiver or tight end as ultimately a wide receiver. But the injuries have caught up with him. He still had a good season, but those two guys are heads and shoulders above everybody else. I think those are the two guys you target. If you can't get one of them, then you're looking at a second tier of maybe Hernandez, Vernon Davis, Jason Witten, and Antonio Davis.
So you've got Vernon Davis in your second tier.
Yeah, he still does some good things. I still think there's some question marks regarding that offense. He's kind of hit or miss. He tends to have one big game and maybe shy away the next game. So his numbers look good at the end of the season, but maybe lopsided from week to week, which can be extremely frustrating for fantasy owners.
And while we're talking about Gronk and we're talking about all these 4 teams that are left and individual players, I mean, you know this better than anybody, Jeff, writing for RotoWire.com. There are guys that have elite years like a Gronkowski, but there's no guarantee that they're going to repeat that level. I mean, even if they aim for the stars and end up in the clouds, it could be good. But how many times have we seen LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, or Frank Gore, or others that have, who's the guy who used to play for Seattle? I'm blanking on his name. Who was a running back? Sean Alexander. How many times do they not be worthy of a top 10 pick by the time the year is out the following year? So it's no guarantee that Gronk's going to be an uber tight end again next year. Sure feels like it here in New England, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah, but you also got to remember all those guys are running backs, and those are running backs that hit the wall with the age pretty quickly. And that's the big thing with your top picks. You've got to take a guy that's a little bit younger, doesn't have a whole lot of mileage, doesn't have a whole lot of health questions. And those are the guys I try to really focus on. They're the occasional guys you'll have that'll have the fluke injury. Jamal Charles is a perfect example of a guy that was highly touted, didn't have a whole lot of, red flags against him going into the draft, but ended up having an unlucky knee injury and was out for the season. But, Gronk's a guy that, he doesn't have tons of mileage on him. He's a bigger guy, so his body's able to take some of the pounding that he takes. Plus, he doesn't touch the ball nearly as much as running backs do. So his decline, I don't think, will be quite as steep.
While we're on the Patriots, Tom Brady, I mean, it seems like an obvious one. He's clearly an elite fantasy quarterback. He's in the top 3. But as this picture seems to indicate, do you put him at 2, as Brady seems to think he is?
I've still got him at 3, and that's just because of some of the question marks regarding their offense. They love to pass the ball. Belichick always is throwing wrinkles in to really trick people up. Sometimes they'll run, sometimes they won't. They got that 2 tight end spread now that really has played huge dividends for him. But those 2 guys above him, Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees, you know what they are. They are a pass-happy offense with tons of weapons, and they're going to put up big numbers. Granted, all 3 guys threw for over 5,000 yards. Or Stafford was in that. Rodgers was just short of 5,000 yards. But I mean, they're all fantastic, and they all put up great numbers.
So you have a tier of a top 3. Rodgers, Brees, and Brady, and then Stafford pecking away at that. Eli Manning possibly. We'll get to him in just a little bit. Michael Vick. I mean, there are others that may come up there. There'll be guys like Cam Newton who'll surprise, but really it's a top 3 and everybody else, right?
Those top 3 as far as quarterbacks, you got to throw Romo in there as well. As heavily criticized as he is, he's still extremely fantasy friendly. He had a very good, big bounce back year coming off that collarbone injury. So, you kind of get into that second tier where you really can't go wrong because the numbers for those guys are going to be relatively close. It's when you get into third and fourth tiers and you start have to really focus on, is this guy going to be my backup? If I'm in a 2-quarterback league, where do I want my second quarterback to be?